The sky was the color of steel, flat, heavy, waiting. The fields below were empty, their grass pressed flat by days of wind. Even the air felt suspended, as if the whole world had taken one slow, uncertain breath and forgot to exhale. The crow came from the west, a black mark moving against the gray. It rode the wind with sharp precision, wings steady, each motion cutting through the stillness like a blade. When it reached the line of poles that ran along the empty road, it chose one at random and landed. The wire swayed once under its weight, then stilled. For a moment, the sound of the world returned. The faint hum of electricity, the rattle of a distant shutter, the whisper of grass against the fence. Then all of it stopped again. The storm was waiting. The crow tilted its head, one eye catching the pale light. It saw far, beyond the road, beyond the fields, to where the sky folded down into dark shapes on the horizon. It could feel the charge in the air, the tension between silence and thunder. Down below, a single truck sat abandoned on the shoulder, its door half open, a map fluttering against the wind. The bird watched the movement of paper for a while, fascinated not by meaning but by motion. It gave a small call, one note, sharp, like a question no one answered. The sound went nowhere. It just hung there, suspended in the waiting air. Far away, a door slammed. The crow's head snapped toward the sound. A figure had stepped out from the farmhouse at the bend. A man, shoulders hunched against the wind, coat pulled tight. He stopped in the yard and looked up at the sky as if he'd forgotten how to read it. The crow watched him. The man didn't move. The world around them was perfectly still now, the kind of stillness that comes before a break, before something begins or ends. The crow shifted its claws on the wire. The current beneath its feet hummed, faint but alive. For a second, lightning cracked somewhere inside the clouds, a flash that didn't reach the ground. The bird's feathers rippled with static. The man finally turned and started walking toward the road. He moved slowly, careful with each step, as if the earth itself might crumble under his boots. When he reached the truck, he paused, hand resting on the open door. He looked up again, directly at the crow. The bird tilted its head the other way. "Go on," the man muttered under his breath. His voice was nearly lost in the wind. "You can feel it too, can't you?" The crow cawed once, low and short, not in answer, but in recognition. The man smiled faintly, though it looked more like habit than hope. Then, he climbed into the truck and closed the door. The wind rose suddenly, bending the grass flat, making the wire hum louder. The crow opened its wings halfway, balancing against the shifting current. Its eyes reflected the first bright thread of lightning as it crawled silently across the sky. The storm hadn't broken yet, but the air between earth and cloud was alive now, trembling with the promise of it. The crow let out one last call. Not sharp this time, but low, drawn out, the sound of something ancient remembering itself. Then, just as the first drop of rain struck the wire, the truck engine started. The headlights cut through the gray, two narrow beams slicing the world in half. And as the man drove down the road, the crow took flight, wings black against the flashing horizon, rising toward the place where sound and silence met. The storm exhaled, and the world, at last, began to move again. The first thunder came slow, not loud, just deep, the kind of sound that rolls through bone instead of air. The man gripped the steering wheel tighter. The road stretched ahead of him, black and wet, its edges already blurred by rain. The wipers couldn't keep up. The storm wasn't falling anymore. It was collapsing, pressing everything toward the earth. Above it all, the crow flew. It moved low, just beneath the clouds, where the air still carried light. The storm had shape from up here, a vast muscle of cloud folding and unfolding, alive and deliberate. The bird's wings caught the wind like knives, cutting across invisible lines of charge that hummed in the air. Below, the truck's headlights flickered once, then steadied. The crow followed them, a pair of small suns crawling through the rain. Inside, the man turned the radio dial. Nothing but static. He tried again. He tried. The static cracked, then broke for a moment. A voice, faint, distant. Storm moving east. Power lines down near highway. Then silence. He exhaled through his teeth. Figures. Water leaked through the crack in the roof and ran down his sleeve. He didn't bother wiping it away. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He'd been driving for hours, maybe days, though the road hadn't changed. He didn't know what he was chasing or running from. Maybe both. The crow screamed once, sharp, high, cutting through the storm. The sound struck the air like flint. Lightning followed. It crawled sideways across the clouds, a web of light stretching wide, before falling toward the fields. The strike hit close enough to shake the truck. The man flinched. The crow did not. For an instant, everything was white. The crow's wings glowed like glass. The truck's tires lifted slightly in the wind. Then, just as quickly, the world fell dark again. The rain hammered harder. The man slowed. The road ahead had vanished beneath a wash of water. The river had spilled over the low bridge, a wide, dark ribbon cutting across the asphalt. He pulled the truck to the side, engine idling. The crow circled above, silent now, watching. The man leaned forward, eyes narrowed at the flood. He could see the guardrails bending under the weight of the current. On the far bank stood a row of poles, power lines trailing into the mist. One wire hung loose, its broken end sparking faintly in the rain. He watched it snap once, twice, then go still. The crow landed on the nearest pole. The metal was slick beneath its claws, the air vibrating with static. Its feathers ruffled against the wind. From here it could see both sides of the road, the truck on one, the dark river on the other, and it could feel what the man could not, the pull of something gathering beneath the surface. The world wasn't angry tonight. It was remembering. Every storm was memory given sound, a retelling of heat, air, and distance. The crow spread its wings wide, the wire humming under its feet. Down below, the man opened his door and stepped into the rain. He stood beside the truck, head tilted up. The rain struck his face like nails, but he didn't move. For the first time, he saw the crow clearly. Black wings stretched, body trembling with power. The wire thrummed brighter now. A low rising hum filled the air. And then, silence. Not absence, but pause. Even the storm seemed to wait. The crow looked down. The man looked up. For one impossible heartbeat, the world between them stopped breathing. Then lightning hit the far end of the line. The flash ran along the wire like a voice, traveling pole to pole until it reached them. The crow took flight just before it arrived. The man fell back, blinded by the white. When he opened his eyes, the storm had moved on. The rain had weakened to a mist. The flood had receded from the bridge. The road ahead was clear again, washed clean. He looked up. The crow was gone. Only the power line remained, silent, unbroken, humming faintly in the quiet. He got back in the truck, turned the key. The engine started on the first try. For a moment, he thought he heard something through the open window. Not thunder, not wind, but wings. A single call echoed through the thinning rain. Low, distant, certain. Then it was gone. The storm had held its breath. And when it finally exhaled, the world was lighter than before. By the time the storm moved east, the land behind it looked stripped bare. The air still smelled of ozone and rain, the kind of scent that lingers in your mouth, metallic and clean. The man drove with his window half open, listening to the hiss of water on the tires, the soft hum of the engine, a small living sound in a world gone still. The sky lightened but never cleared. Clouds hung low, pressed into the earth like a ceiling too heavy to lift. Ahead, through the thinning mist, he saw the first sign of the town. A water tower, its paint peeled to gray, a name half erased by rust. He slowed. Every window he passed was dark. No porch lights, no radio, only the wind moving through telephone wires that no longer hummed. The main street had puddles deep enough to swallow reflections. He parked by the curb in front of a gas station. The sign above it still swung from its chain, creaking with every gust. Inside, the aisles were empty. The glass door hung open, its bell missing. He stepped out, boots sinking into the mud. Silence. The deep kind, not peaceful, but hollow. He walked up the road. his shadow broken by puddles of light from the gray sky. The only movement came from scraps of paper that blew out of an alley. Old receipts, wrappers, someone's list of things they'd meant to buy and never did. Then he saw it. At the far end of the street, above the old post office, one light still burned. It wasn't bright, just a steady golden glow from a single lamp outside the second-floor window. He stopped, blinking against the drizzle. "How?" he muttered. "No one's got power out here." The crow landed on the telephone pole beside it. It came out of the sky like a piece of night falling into place. Wings slick with rain, feathers gleaming faintly blue where the light touched them. It shook once, droplets scattering into the air. The man stared up at it. "You again," he said softly. The crow tilted its head, one dark eye fixed on him. He stepped closer to the building. The light flickered once, then steadied. The bulb glowed too warmly for electricity. It looked more like firelight trapped behind glass. The crow gave a single rasping call, short and sharp. The sound bounced off the empty storefronts, echoing back smaller, weaker, until it disappeared entirely. The man tried the post office door. It opened with a groan. Inside, the air was thick with dust and damp. A row of metal mailboxes lined the far wall, their doors rusted shut. He moved slowly, his footsteps soft against the warped floor. The crow's shadow crossed the windows outside, its wings cutting quick lines through the light. He reached the stairs and hesitated. The glow from above spilled faintly down the steps. He climbed. Each board creaked, but none broke. At the top, the hall was narrow, ending in a single open door. The light came from within. Inside was a small room, just a chair, a desk, and a lamp that looked far too old to still work. Its cord hung loose, unplugged. Yet the bulb burned steady, casting circles of amber across the walls. The man stepped closer. The air was warm here, impossibly warm. He reached out, hesitated, then touched the glass. It wasn't hot. It wasn't even warm. He frowned. "How?" The crow landed on the windowsill behind him. Its reflection wavered across the glass of the lamp. For a heartbeat, it looked like something human, a man's shape, standing exactly where the bird perched. He turned. Only the crow. It blinked once, then hopped onto the floor, feathers rustling. He watched it walk toward the lamp. The light seemed to bend toward it, like a flame drawn to breath. The crow stopped in front of the desk and made a low sound. Not a caw, but something deeper, quieter. A rumble that seemed to come from the wood itself. Then, just as suddenly, the light went out. Darkness filled the room, heavy and complete. He froze. The only sound was rain against the window. When his eyes adjusted, the crow was gone. Only its reflection remained, faint, fading, in the dead glass of the lamp. He stood there for a long time, the smell of smoke faint in the air. When he finally stepped outside again, the streetlights were all dark, the sky a pale bruise above the rooftops. But far to the west, where the storm had come from, lightning still flickered, too distant to hear, too close to forget. He looked up. The power lines stretched above him, cutting across the sky in clean black strokes. One shadow moved along them, silent, steady, following the wire out of town, a crow's silhouette vanishing into the horizon. The man whispered into the wind, "You're not done, are you?" No one answered, but as he stood there, the air around him changed, a faint static hum brushing the edge of hearing, the same sound he'd felt under the storm. He smiled, tired, uncertain. Then, he got back in his truck, turned the key, and began to drive. Behind him, the town lay quiet again. But in one window, the one above the post office, the light flickered once, just enough to show the outline of a bird's shadow passing across it. Then, it went dark for good. The road wound out of the town like a scar that refused to close. The man drove without music, without purpose, following the thin black lines of the power poles as they disappeared into the mist. The storm had moved east, but its ghost still hung in the air, a faint smell of metal, a tension just beneath the skin of the world. Above him, the wires hummed again, not with power, there was none, but with something older, quieter. A vibration like breath caught in the throat of the sky. The sound rose and fell as he drove, steady as heartbeat, low as memory. The crow followed. It didn't fly fast. It glided from pole to pole, sometimes vanishing into cloud, sometimes reappearing in the corner of his windshield, a black mark against the washed-out sky. He didn't know why he kept driving. Maybe because stopping felt heavier than motion. Maybe because the crow was leading him somewhere, and he'd run out of reasons to question what that meant. The road narrowed. The trees closed in. Branches hung low and wet, brushing the roof of the truck like fingers. The humming grew stronger. He slowed, rolled down the window. The air was warm here, unnaturally so. The sound was clearer now. Not just a hum, but a tone, a voice of metal stretched thin across distance. He stopped the truck and stepped out. The field on either side of the road shimmered with water left by the storm. The poles marched across it, each one holding a single black wire that stretched toward the horizon, trembling faintly in the wind. The crow perched on the nearest crossbar. Its feathers caught what little light there was and threw it back as oil-dark blue. It watched him the way only a crow can, as if it already knew the ending. He looked up. "You again," he said, the words soft enough to vanish before reaching the air. "What do you want from me?" The bird gave no answer. The humming deepened. He turned in a slow circle. Every pole in sight was shaking now, just enough to make the insulators rattle, a chorus of glass and tension. Somewhere far down the line, lightning flashed once, white and soundless, too distant to be thunder, too close to be gone. He walked toward the crow. The air crackled faintly around the poles. Each step brought the sound closer to meaning, as if the hum were forming words in a language too old to speak aloud. He stopped at the base of the pole and touched it. The wood was warm. A jolt ran through him. Not pain, not shock, but recognition. The vibration climbed his arm into his chest until he could feel the rhythm of it under his ribs. It wasn't electricity. It was memory. The line was singing. He looked up, mouth open, eyes reflecting the dull gleam of sky. The crow shifted its weight, opened its wings, and let out a single call, harsh and pure, the sound splitting the air in two. The humming stopped. Every wire fell silent at once. He stumbled back, breath caught. The world collapsing into stillness, so complete it felt like a held breath before speech. The crow stared down at him, feathers lifting in the wind that wasn't there. Then, the first pole cracked. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder. One after another, the poles began to sway, snapping at their bases, the wires snapping free, whipping through the air in long arcs of broken song. He ran. The truck waited on the road, engine still idling, a small, fragile pulse in the chaos. He climbed in, slammed the door, started forward, tires spitting mud, headlights cutting through the gray. In the rearview mirror, the crow was still there, wings spread wide on the last standing pole. Behind it, the line fell one section at a time, sparks spilling into the dark fields like lost constellations. He didn't stop driving until the road ended, until the fields gave way to a ridge where no wires ran, and the hum could no longer reach him. When he stepped out again, the wind was clean. The world was quiet. He looked back the way he'd come. The valley below was lit with 100 small fires where the power lines had fallen. The smoke rose in perfect columns, thin and slow, like breath finally released. High above it all, a single black shape wheeled through the haze, circling, then vanishing into cloud. He stood there until the smoke faded. Then he whispered, without knowing why, "It wasn't just the storm, was it?" The wind carried his voice away, turning it into something that sounded almost like a reply. A low hum, fading, until even that was gone. And when silence finally came, it stayed. By morning, the smoke was gone. What remained was a stillness so deep, it seemed to press against the skin. The man stood on the ridge where the road ended, the air around him faintly charred, faintly sweet, the scent of rain and burnt grass. The sky was pale and untrustworthy. Clouds hovered low, indecisive, holding no promise of storm or sun. Below, the valley stretched in a wide sweep of gray, the fallen power lines lying across it like veins without a pulse. Nothing moved, no birds, no wind. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was aftermath. a kind of waiting that came only after something irreversible had already happened. He walked down the slope, boots sinking into the damp earth. The sound of his steps felt strange, too loud in the vacuum left behind by the vanished hum. Each footfall echoed back at him, as though the valley were trying to remember how to answer. Halfway down, he stopped. The last of the poles stood before him, still upright, leaning slightly into the wind that wasn't there. The wire was gone, snapped clean. The wood was scorched in places, blackened in streaks that looked like handwriting across its surface. He touched it once, gently. It was cool now. "You were singing," he whispered, "and now it's all gone quiet." The pole said nothing, but the wind finally stirred, one long sigh that rippled through the grass and bent the nearest weeds flat before disappearing again. He reached the road. The truck sat where he'd left it, wet with dew, its engine silent. The crow was there too. It stood on the hood, feathers sleek, eyes black as the horizon. He stopped a few paces away. "You followed me." The crow tilted its head, one wing twitching as if to acknowledge the words. He glanced toward the valley. "You did this, didn't you? Or maybe you just remembered what the world forgot." The bird cawed once, quiet, soft, almost uncertain. He took another step forward. Was it the storm you wanted to end, or the noise after it? The crow hopped onto the fender, closer now, close enough that he could see the rain beating on its feathers. It blinked once, slow. Then it opened its beak and made a sound. Not a cry, not a call, but a low rolling noise that came from somewhere deeper than lungs. It wasn't loud, but it filled the air completely. For a second, the valley answered. The ground beneath them trembled, just enough to make the truck's mirrors rattle. The poles in the distance groaned, the sound of wood shifting under invisible weight. Then, quiet again. The crow hopped back, wings half open. The man exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. "You can make it all stop," he said softly, "but you can't bring it back." The crow tilted its head the other way. He smiled faintly. "Neither can I." He drove until the sun broke through, a weak light, gold at the edges, leaking between clouds that were finally beginning to thin. The road was empty except for the scattered remains of wire glittering in the ditches, humming faintly when the wind passed over them. It wasn't electricity, just memory caught in metal. At the far end of the valley, he stopped the truck and stepped out again. The crow followed overhead, its shadow sliding across the hood, the ground, his face. He looked up. "You still here?" The crow circled once, twice, then landed on the last standing pole by the roadside. Its claws clicked against the wood. The bird looked east, toward the light breaking through the clouds. "Go on then," the man said. "You're not made for stillness." The crow spread its wings, black against the softening sky. The air held still one last time, as if the whole world were waiting for permission. Then the bird leapt, wings catching the first real wind since the storm. It climbed higher, turned once above the valley, and gave a single cry that tore through the silence like a name remembered after years of forgetting. The sound echoed off the hills and faded, not vanishing, just softening, until it became part of the hum that lived beneath everything. The man stood beside the road until the crow was only a dot against the brightening sky. When he finally climbed back into the truck, the wire on the ground gave one last whisper, as though finishing a song. He smiled, turned the key, and drove toward the horizon. Behind him, the valley stayed quiet, but not empty. The silence there was no longer waiting. It was remembering.